The global economy is donezo. Goodbye to a decade of fake prosperity built on the back of endless piling of debt about to come to an end. Or is it? At least from the last decade. We're also going to talk about the military tensions rising around the world, from Russia and Norway to China, Vietnam, and North Korea. Welcome to The Real Report. Happy Friday. Thank you for tuning in. Crush the like button, hit the subscribe button with the notification bell, and comment down below anything at all. It's going to help me out a lot. This is going to be part 2 of our experiment where I'm just going to cover all the news, and we've got this B-roll footage in the background to see how the algo reacts, just because the last video I did this on, we started to get a little more traction, so perhaps it's a way to get around the censors. So you guys are just going to have to listen in. Again, hit the like button and let me know what you think about this new format down below. I'll probably also start uploading on Spotify. Now, economically ignorant Americans want more stimmy checks to fight inflation, proving that most people have absolutely no idea what causes inflation. The majority of Americans in a recent poll said they want the federal government to hand out stimulus checks to, guess what? Combat inflation. Oh boy. The poll commissioned by Newsweek, 63% of the respondents said they agreed that the feds should issue new stimulus checks to tackle inflation. 42% said they strongly agree, while only 18% disagreed, and 15% of those interviewed said they didn't care. Defined, inflation is, of course, an increase in the money supply. Now, rising consumer prices are one symptom of inflation, but the government has effectively redefined inflation as, quote, rising prices, aka most people think a symptom of inflation is, well, inflation. As a result, most people have no idea where it actually comes from. Of course, when you accurately define inflation, it becomes crystal clear who is to blame. That would be the Federal Reserve, that has nothing to do with federal, and of course, the United States Gov. So, chew on that for a moment. If you guys haven't, I strongly suggest reading a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It will put everything into perspective for you. Now, today, people aren't even asking the government to fight inflation. They just want Uncle Sam to hand them money in order to mitigate the pain of rising prices. The Federal Reserve pumped over $3 trillion into the economy after the 2008 financial crisis through, of course, QE, that's quantitative easing, and also stimulated credit creation with zero interest rates that lasted more than a decade. During the pandemic, hopefully I can say that word, the Fed doubled down, pumping nearly $5 trillion more into the economy and dropping rates to zero yet again. Hey, really, if you're listening, this is definitely interesting, because this and the next articles support 100% exactly the conversation that we had. Now, the federal government exacerbated the situation during the pandemic by handing out 3 rounds of stimulus money along with trillions of dollars in other aid. However, the October CPI came in at 8.2% on an annual basis. Wages are not keeping up with rising prices, and guess what? Average hourly earnings actually decreased 3% from September of last year. Stimulus checks might provide a little temporary relief, but they would ultimately make inflation worse and prices would rise even higher in the future. Of course, most people don't understand that concept. They just know they're struggling. They want the government to make it better. You're paying for your stimmy checks right now through the hidden tax called inflation. You always have to pay. Nothing is ever free. There are no handouts. People need to learn that lesson. New car loan rates set to hit 14-year highs. Affordability crisis worsens. The auto loan interest rates are rising, having hit the highest level since 2019, which isn't significant, but the next bump up is going to be a 14-year high. New car loans are an exorbitant 6.3% in October on average, and the Fed is expected to raise interest rates again to the 4th straight meeting in an unprecedented move, the most since early 1980s. So we're either stuck in 2008 or 9, or we're stuck in 1980s. Neither spell anything good for any of you. And of course, in the 1980s, they spiked rates to quell rampant inflation, but this means the federal funds rate will have a new range of 3.75 to 4%, the highest since 2007. Now, the new APRs for new vehicles track the Fed funds rate, expect to hit highs not seen since the early 2009s in the near term. Rising interest rates are creating a major barrier to entry for car shoppers and forcing many consumers to sit out of the market due to high prices and limited options, and that's likely going to continue to do so over high interest rates. So that's unfortunate. One of the interesting comments on one of these articles is, the era of fake prosperity built on the back of endless piling up of debt is coming to an end. It never made any sense that millions of desk jockeys who do nothing but shuffle papers around and browse Twitter all day should be cruising around in these incredibly sophisticated machines that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. All of it was fake. It all came on the back of a system that borrows further and further into the future to pay for today's decadence. But you can only pile up so much debt before it becomes impossible to service the interest. The bill is now due. Lyft to lay off about 700 employees in a second round of job cuts, cutting another 13% of their staff, and that comes on top of the 2% of their staff that they cut a couple months ago. And of course, they're not the only ones. Amazon told employees it's pausing corporate hiring, and payment startup Stripe, an absolute, I'm going to, pardon my French, shit company, on Thursday said it is laying off about 14% of its employees. Rival, Uber, also, guess what? Their stock's down 37% in the past year, and Uber's also slowed hiring. They're not the only ones to either fire or stop hiring. Elon Musk is firing half of Twitter on Friday. Also an interesting one, if you guys saw the news, roughly 80% of accounts talking about the Russia-Ukraine war were bots to sway public opinion, something that I've guessed was the case long ago. Now, 3,700 jobs at Twitter, roughly half the company's entire workforce, are out. Musk intends to reverse the company's existing work-from-home anywhere policy, asking that the employees remaining report to the office. Thousands of people protest in Madrid among Spain's high inflation. Thousands of people have taken to the street in Spain's capital, Madrid, for higher pay and better working conditions, in the first mass protest since the cost of living crisis began across all of Europe. They're saying, quote, "There is no dignity without wage hikes, salary hikes, or social strife," because the Eurozone consumer prices climbed at a record pace of 10.7% last month. Now, when consumer prices jump 10% and salaries only rise by 1%, of course that means workers are losing purchasing power fast and quite literally getting poorer by the day. Unions want an increase of 4 to 5% this year and 2 to 3% the following 2 years, but they also know that's probably not going to happen, and even if it does, it's still not going to keep up with 10%. Almost 11. European Union governments say the surging inflation coupled with an economic slowdown is due in large part to, guess what? Ding, ding, ding. That wonderful talking point that's oh so convenient to blame it all on. The war in Ukraine. That is the root cause of every single problem you have. Now, of course, the region in general is going to lack about 50% of their fuel. So they're also saying, of course, that's going to jeopardize the economy. And we've also seen in numerous countries already, due to the fuel crisis, having to shut down, close plants, and limit production. So I'll probably cover that in another video. But talking about heating and missing about 30 billion cubic meters of fuel, Austria looks to ban oil and coal heaters from 2023. This is absolutely, if I didn't know better, I'd say it was a parody. Austria's government is looking to ban the use of new fossil fuel heaters as of next year and replace very old oil and coal heaters with climate-friendly options by 2025. Nothing like cutting off your nose to spite your face. Now, getting into the article, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Austria received around 80% of the natural gas it consumed from Russia. As of August, this high dependence on Russian gas flows had dropped below 50%. Their climate minister, that is Austria's energy and climate minister, said, quote, "The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has shown how vulnerable our energy supply is. The answer to that can only be to get rid of Russian gas." So I'll give somebody a cookie if you can explain how that works. The answer to that can only be to get rid of Russian gas. Huh. Austria will support the proposed heater switch by making available around 2 billion euros by 2026. However, the Renewable Heat Act says that fossil fuel heating such as coal, oil, and gas should all be phased out in Austria by 2040. It's beyond laughable, but hey, you do you. Bank of England predicts longest recession in history as the UK government prepares, guess what? More taxes. That, of course, more government spending will fix the problem. The Bank of England predicted the United Kingdom will experience the longest recession in recorded history as the central bank once again raised interest rates to cope with the crippling inflation, and as a supposedly conservative government is preparing to again impose more taxes. Britons were informed by the Bank of England on Thursday in a lovely memo that it would be raising interest rates by another 0.75% all the way to 3%, which you're thinking probably not much, but it's the largest single increase in 30 years and puts the current rate on par with the aftermath of the 2008, you guessed it, financial crisis. To put the rate hikes in context, those with households of a £200,000 standard variable mortgage will see their payments increase by about £1,000 per year. Brutal. And getting into military news, South Korea scrambles jets after detecting 180 North Korean warplanes near the border. North Korea's unprecedented number of missiles firing over the last 2 days, which stands at 27 or more, including an ICBM. Of course, that's an intercontinental ballistic missile. This year's operation with the U.S. and South Korea was called Vigilant Storm, in which 100 American warplanes and 140 of South Korea's planes were doing drills. Of course, in response, North Korea launched some 180 flights near the shared military demarcation line. So, of course, things are escalating around the globe. North Korea has warned both Seoul and Washington will, quote, pay the most horrible price in history if it persists with the provocations. And Russia threatens Norway with, quote, final destruction of relations. Russia has issued new warnings and threats against Norway, a founding member of course, NATO, for its role in expanding NATO's operations in the Arctic region. Destruction, this is the Russian spokesperson's answer. Destruction course towards escalation of tensions in the Euro-Arctic region and the final destruction of Russian-Norwegian relations. Any future unfriendly actions will be followed by a timely and adequate response. And China, here's an interesting one that'll probably get me banned from YouTube. China says, comrade, Vietnam agreed to never allow U.S. bases on its soil. China and Vietnam are looking to a deep strategic partnership which centers on building a stable supply chain and distancing the region from U.S. military influence and presence. Vietnamese Communist Party leader Trong on Monday in Beijing. Vietnam is a comrade and brother. The two released a joint statement, that's Vietnam and China, the two countries' commitment to developing healthy and stable bilateral relations from a strategic and long-term perspective during a period of great changes in the world. Note that last part, during a period of great changes in the world. Change out changes with reset. And the joint unwavering adherence to the leadership of the Communist Party. Lovely. Trong is a staunch Marxist and a also close comrade, and I quote, sincere friend of the CPC. Vietnam has made China the top priority in our foreign policy. So that's all I've got for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, again, smash the like button, comment down below, even if it's just a thumbs up, subscribe, share with family and friends, blah, 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 blah. See you in the next one.